To my mind, the first elements of the proposed leadership framework are key to effecting this cultural change. And yes, I've done my homework. And if I may quote from the proposed developing framework document, the first element of the NHS leadership framework talks about demonstrating personal qualities. And I quote, "Effective leadership requires individuals to draw on their values, strengths, and abilities to deliver high standards of service, continuing personal development and acting with integrity." It's not rocket science to see where these values conflict with the two examples that I've given you. The second element talks about working with others, where it states that leadership requires individuals to work with others, requiring them to demonstrate effectiveness in developing networks, building and maintaining relationships, and encouraging contributions, and working with teams. I mean, to my mind, there is no place for overinflated egos or a blame culture. From my previous life as an educational leader, I have a very clear understanding and experience of implementing cultural change. Changing an organisation's culture is just as effective as investing in sexy new bits of kit. The NHS is really good at the acute care firefighting stuff. It's the bit that comes after that where it currently fails to deliver. And I'd like to ask you this. What's the point of saving somebody's life if the life that they are then faced with involves lying in bed with urine-soaked, soiled sheets for what seems like hours when no one responds to your pager? I say this from personal experience. If teams are well motivated and respect their leaders and managers, the teams work harder and they achieve a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. In short, the service to the user improves and there's greater satisfaction for all involved. When teams don't respect their leaders or managers, individuals move into job mode, with all the attendant issues of poor morale, low productivity, high absenteeism, etc., etc., etc. Does that sound familiar? Then ask yourself why and what you can do about it. Have I had a bad deal from the NHS? Quite honestly, I don't know, because since I've taken time to look about me and get better informed, I've had a bit of a shock. I should have expected a higher quality of care, and I should have expected to have my voice heard. So what made a difference to me when I was at my lowest ebb in hospital? The good bits are emotional intelligence, the simple things that a skilled nurse can give you, like a gentle squeeze of your foot at lights out time. Put succinctly, the overt manifestation of a valuable personal quality. It cost nothing, but as an exchange of care, it made a priceless contribution to my belief that somebody really cared about my welfare, and I was not merely heading for oblivion as a successful early discharge statistic on a spreadsheet. The bad bits about lack of information and poor communication. We've already heard from Mr. Lansley, the new strapline in the NHS, no decisions made about you without involving you or your carers and family. In my specific case, the consultant clinicians in my hospital were very happy to wheel in medical students to interview me because I was relatively young, a science teacher, and spasmodically cogent following my stroke. But when it came to deciding whether being on a ward populated by octogenarian, incontinent men was compromising my psychological welfare, the decision to leave me where I was made without my consultation, or that of consultation with my family or carers. I remember on several mornings waking up to the stench of urine and feces filling my airways, pulling the cover over my head, closing my eyes, and praying that I would not wake up again. That's just not me. And needless to say, I'm very, very pleased that my prayers weren't answered. So what about aftercare? I'd vowed to myself that I was going to walk out of hospital. I almost did, but my ambition was thwarted by the need to have a wheelchair close to my side for health and safety reasons. C'est la vie, you know. But at a Headway support group meeting last week, I asked the group where had the NHS failed their expectations. There were 23 people at that group, and they were unanimous that following discharge they felt abandoned to their fate. In my own case, it was only upon discharge that my rehab really started. It was post-discharge when I really started to try and understand the strengths and weaknesses of the NHS and how it could accommodate my own newly acquired strengths and left-sided weakness. In 2006, I was very lucky to be the recipient of weekly visits from the community stroke team, who helped to keep my morale high and pushed me to fight the neurological fatigue that plagued me in order to focus on my physical recovery. This service was provided for 5 months, by which time I'd taken and passed my driving assessment and was growing in self-confidence. One of the occupational therapists from the team came with me on my driving test for moral support. It was a lovely touch that I appreciated. It's got to be said, though, that I owe much of my physical and psychological rehabilitation to the community stroke team, whose support was invaluable to me. This small team embodied all the best elements of what a user desires and requires from the NHS at discharge. The team was dedicated, well-managed, reliable, and was made up of individuals who had the expertise and emotional sensitivity and desire to deliver their vision of providing a better quality of life for the users. This service was developed and implemented through the vision, dedication, and bloody-mindedness of a senior occupational therapist who demonstrated what can be achieved by good leadership at a local level. This aspect of my post-discharge care package was managed extremely well. But I'm aware that it's not available to everybody, despite the national standards and the guidelines for post-discharge care of strokies. What a pity. By June 2006, I was in need of more cerebral stimulation as a respite from daytime TV, and I negotiated a phased return to work, but in a new role as the head of Faculty of Science, a lateral promotion that I had agreed to prior to my accident, after being extremely successful as the head of Faculty of Humanities for 5 years. I initially worked for 2 half-days per week and attended all the senior management meetings. And then in September 2006, I applied for a place on an ESF-funded 20-week course of conductive education at NICE, the National Institute for Conductive Education based in Moseley in Birmingham. I used this as a way to kickstart more physical recovery. And then by some quirk of the NHS, I managed to get transferred to the nearest hospital to my place of work for additional physiotherapy. I still don't know how this happened, but I assume it was a bit of practical management of my case by someone that really helped me. But it was only available for 6 months. I learnt a lot about good and bad physiotherapy during this period of time, which is why I now give talks to undergraduate and MSc physiotherapists at Birmingham School of Health Studies. They keep asking me back, so I must be doing something right. Despite telling them quite bluntly that the best physiotherapy that I've received to date has been provided by German-trained physios working for the NHS. What can we learn from this? So back to leadership and management. Since getting early retirement in 2008, I've constantly sought out avenues to use my skills and personal qualities to manage my own cognitive and psychological rehabilitation. Physically, I'm self-managing. I think that's a euphemism of the NHS to go away and do it yourself. But it's a consequence of getting involved in PPI work at local and national level that I'm here today. I work alongside some truly inspirational leaders in the NHS, individuals who have respect and admiration of their teams and patients. I've seen the objective evidence in the terms of patient outcomes to validate this respect. These beacons of good practice range from clinical leads developing and delivering stroke services within the West Midlands to occupational therapists and physiotherapists giving up their own time to work with third sector organisations such as Headway and Different Strokes. So from total despair in August 2005 to May 2011, I'm now partially restored to my former self, but better informed and hopefully approaching a position where I can use a pretty devastating negative personal experience to affect some change in the NHS. That's my long-term personal goal. I now invite you to share it with me. That's all, folks. Thank you.